Hi, this is Alexcursus. Most of the time, I am looking at one gunpla or figurine and see how accurate it is to the lore. But sometimes I would get a bunch of them and make some comparisons to sort of talk about their relationship as well as some of the law implication, or rather what seems to be law inconsistency, are actually quite well justified, and how they often related to real world production, which is ironically very common for real world weaponry. Real world weaponry does not have, say, publication troubles, but they do have, say, public relations or politics or whole other non-technical reasons for real-world weaponry to evolve, develop to the way they are. And for mobile suits, it is the same. Mostly those would be coming down to publication, or rather, all the public relations, marketing, etc. will funnel and treated with publication, and so yes, that makes mobile suits fictional weaponry very similar to real world weaponry in this regard. This time I'm comparing the GM base model, GM Type C, and GM Type D, or Code District Type. Obviously, when the GM was introduced, or immediately after with the mobile suit variation, the Type C and Type D wasn't really there. There are similar ideas, but they are not realized. And so later on, when Bandai do a bit more about 1 Year War or immediately after, they realized those concepts that they had illustrated with the mobile suit variation for the GM. But that's not all of it. Also, before we go any further, this video also serves as my thought process of giving the HGUC original first run base model GM a as for style over, say, the Code District type. It's not just part separation and color separation. There's also there's a certain iconicness about the base model GM that these two cannot compete with. So yes, in the law, the GM Code District type is a upgrade of the base model GM with the new type of cooling system and power plant from Gundam Unit 4 and 5, hence the difference in the chest. And the Model C is a straight upgrade straight from the RGM-79, so it has more similar chest design. However, publication-wise, that's a very different story. After the success of Char's Counterattack, Bandai realized people actually like basic mobile suit designs. While I wouldn't say exotic, but elaborate design appeared in Gundam Double Zeta is slightly less appealing. So Bandai went back to do some 1 Year War side story where they can bring out some very basic mobile suits. And so they choose to get what was very successful, the par labor famed Izubutsu Yutaka, to redesign the mobile suit, just everything actually, from the Gundam, from the GM to the Xeon machines. The standard base model GM or general type GM in the War in Pocket series is actually the GM Command, but the GM command is a more original design from Itsubachi instead of the code district type where he pretty much updated Okawa's design, which is what Bandai wanted. Bandai, while Bandai is looking for a new look for the mobile suits, they are not looking for something that completely replaced their mobile suits. And so I would be using the code district type here. And then after the success of Warm Pockets, Bandai got more comfortable with more 1 Year War or extension of 1 Year War stories. With the status memory, they have the GM Type C, which is redesigned by one Katoki Hajime. At this point, haven't been at this point, Hajime isn't working on HGUC. It would be about nearly a decade later that he does it. But at this point, Katoki feels like he could bring some extra realism into the mobile suit designs. And he chose to basically update everything for the 1 Year War. And the GM Type C was supposed to be the late war type GM where Federation, after learning what they know about mobile suit combat, have upgraded or restored the GM back to more Gundam-like. Of course, that Gundam for Katoki would be his redesigned or modified version of the RX-78-2. So, at this point, Bandai is actually trying to replace the Okawara GM or to an extension Gundam, but they know they can't replace Gundam. But they might be able to replace the GM to something more appealing to the mass audience that aren't fans of the series yet. And so they have two tries. The Itsupatsu from the Paleba, a more grounded mecha series, and then Katoki Hajime, whose design have been very successful among the fans or other adjacent military modeling enthusiasts. And so these two designs supposed to serve as Bandai's new standard design for the GM. Like if either one comes out on top, Bandai can probably just, swipe over this very basic, very not very cool red shirt, stun double-ish GM and make more sales with GMs. That's kind of Bandai's thought process. However, they miss something rather important. But before we get into all that, in order to come to the conclusion that I would eventually come to, I want to get some close up and compare these guys. Let's start off with the GM and the code district type. As you can see, both of them got a mountain looking visor, the kanji mountain. That's how they sometimes describe this visor shape, as the mountain type visor. Or a very trooper. If you have seen a military war game table, this would be what the unit looks like. Both of them got a falcon, and it's about to kind of emphasize on the earphone or the radar transceivers and an additional antenna. Do note that Okawara do add antennas to the GM sometimes, but most of the time, yeah, it just have the coil inside the headphones. Both of them have a basic mouthpiece, just a slap. The exhaust, which Gundam do have exhaust on its head, and the code district type restored that, which I do think Itsupachi understand Okawara's design. Even though people say Ichibaji does not know how machine works, I do think he understands Okawara's design language. Okawara sometimes for some of the GM variants, Okawara do add extra vents on the GM's head, but most of the time they don't exist or not visible at least. Ichibachi sort of latch onto that and added that on. And then short events, that's actually coming from Okawara's Unit 4 and 5 drawings. Although they are not as large as these or on NT1, Ichibachi put that back in. And then this separate hatch. This design, I would say, well, okay, this is kind of the original, like this is kind of RX-78-2 design. While usually we see it as a single slab like here on the GM, it is often described as a separate unit to cover the cockpit of the core fighter. So I don't think this is, out of the ordinary as well. Down to the skirt, co-district type have the Federation V instead of nothing for base model GM. I think that's nice. A bit of a calling card that yes, Federation is proud about the co-district type and not so much about the main board. Down to the legs, it is basically the same thing, just some extra details to, make it feel like the co-district type is more well made. The back is actually fairly similar, except that the Type D have these tubes running inside. Kind of a separate topic, but it is a suggestion that the Type D heads of Federation mobile suits have more Xeon influence than people usually give credit for. Backpack, again, very simple design language, just doubling the thrusters to indicate that the co-district type is better. So is the back. Just slightly more armor segment to make it feel more realistic. Then the extra thruster on the shoulder armor, again a sign of better performance. No clear joint hub, but replaced with a elbow pad. Again, a good signifier for higher performance. The shield, a simple reinforced rib instead of the Federation star. On one hand, I do agree the less signature shield is a more realistic take, but on another hand, the Federation star does serve some purpose for a shield. Let's say I come to appreciate the Federation star. I didn't hate the Federation star, but I do not like how Bandai doesn't have a separate color piece for the Federation star and just have a red cross here. That's not, like, that just looks bad. I'd rather Bandai just go, you know what, we are just going to give you a red slab and then a sticker for the Federation anchor. And I think that's better on one side for production and on the other feels more realistic at points. While Kadoki does design the GM Type C mostly based on his own Gundam RX-78-2, but he do borrow some ideas from the Type D or co-district type. For example, the exhaust on the side of the head need more pronounced headphones and the antenna. Not saying Ichibachi come up with all this on his own, but the success of the War in Pocket definitely encourage Kadoki to include those elements on his GM Type C. Down to the chest, Since the GM Type C is supposed to be closer to the RX-78-2, that's why it does not have the shoulder vents and a more RX-78-like chest vents. Although you can see the cockpit armor compartment is very much independent like the Code District type. Same for the skirt, not quite Gundam, but a simplified version. Down to the legs, again, very simple. Both of them have the joint hatches. Onto the back, both have the transfer cables, conduits at the back of the knee, and then a very simple calf. And well, okay, this is more of a model thing where both of them have independent ankles. And then back skirt, Katoki decided to have the thrusters at the butt, while Ichibachi just have them right in the middle of the pelvis. So very similar, to be honest. And the backpack, again, twin thrusters for both sides, but otherwise fairly similar. Shoulder pads, again, thruster on the side, and then Katoki just have a lifting eye from the top. We can chase that down if Bandai released those Okawara designs, but at the moment, Katoki is the one that brings the lifting eye on the shoulder back into the Gundam fashion. Forearms. Again, I don't think Katoki really follows Ichibachi's design, but it definitely influenced him to design the arms instead of square blocks having angles for more natural movements. The shield, pretty much the same mold. I don't think they're drawn too differently in the shows either, so that is a very good representation of that. Now that we know how kind of the Type C borrow from Type D, let's see what they have restored from the base model. It is very clear GM is Okawara's child, even though it has been touched by Katoki a bit, and the Type C is pure Katoki. Yeah, through and through. As Katoki designed the Type C as a late war GM to begin with, he does bring back a lot of the elements of the original GM. Like I have mentioned, no shoulder vents, and then much closer to original Gundam in layout. The elbow joint with the round hub module. Now I want to talk about the guns as well. Ichibachi designed the machine gun for the Code District type based on the stand gun because it is a iconic Allies SMG, and it makes sense for the Federation to have something similar as a quick and cheap to produce weapon, especially for close quarter fighting. But he also designed the bullpup machine gun. The bullpup machine gun is for the GM Command and GM Sniper 2. They represent the more refined, as the name GM Command suggests. They are commandos, or at least more special, well-trained units. That's why they have the newer, sort of a inverted FAMAS French assault rifle look. Although the real FAMAS goes to the Gundam NT1 with his beam rifle, the GMs get a simpler version that actually resembles more like a cut down brand machine gun, which I guess sort of work as well in a weird sense. And Okawala just go, you know what? GM just get a basic laser, well, not laser, it's plasma, basic plasma pistol. Obviously, like I talked about before, well, for a while, that Federation switched to machine guns because they are still cheaper to produce. They are traditional firearms. They will be cheaper to produce than beam weaponry. And with the budget cuts after the end of the war, it would make sense for the post-war GM to wield basic firearms instead of beam weaponry. So, um, like I said, the GM Type C and GM Type D are both good designs that I like a lot. Like I call the Code District Type the coolest GM, and I don't think anyone would say Katoki designs are good. But both of them miss something. Okawara designed the base model GM to be as basic as possible. When you think of a bare minimum, you might think of like, the GM Type C or GM Type D. And Okawara just go, no, we should go a step below. The thruster on the side of the shoulder, not completely necessary with the mobile suit's aimbag system. The separate front skirts, not super needed when, the fine joints is actually really vulnerable without the legs in front of it. The shin stays. The shin, everybody stay with the single piece. The forearm, more or less the same thing. A elbow armor, a elbow guard on the Code District Type because it is really a close quarter machine, but not entirely necessary. Nor was it on the original RX-78-2 either. They had, instead of elaborate body parts, Okawara just went with the most simple shape and lines. And so, despite the Code District Type and the Type C being well liked by the community, Bandai found themselves struggling to produce these guys in a low enough price so that people would buy them in bulk. I mean, they did with the older kids. They basically just go, you know what? We are not going to give you any of these small colors. You just have the big colors for your Europla. Which, if the GM had Europla, you probably only need to paint the yellow bits and the visors and the camera. But for these guys, Code District Type, you're doomed. There's a lot of little things to color in. But even for the Type C, you still got the vents, a lot of these details, and then the reds, etc. Like, it is slightly better on the Type C for the old Europla, but it is, you will look like, so while Bandai got these two new designs that the community likes, but they didn't have the engineering to realize them, to show them, in their better lights than the old GM. And so they sort of fall off the radar, after the initial release, and how Gundam sort of went under for quite a few years. With the revive of HGUC, Bandai got to do it again. And this time, for the Code District Type, they are kind of testing the water and go, okay, we have the basic GM. The Code District Type is just a modified design. We can modify our mode and we will get a code district type. And the same thing happens. The community is like, okay, the GM base model GM is excellent. There needs to be some improvements are needed, but it's excellent overall. But the code district type doesn't quite deliver it because it is just more complex, and Bandai wasn't ready to push the price point up too far. With the Type C, with Katoki himself at hand, basically push the powered GM out first, because that is a bit of a special unit. And once that is successful, he pushed the Type C, which is sold at a high price point, but with more sprues and more details, so it is closer to its anime counterpart or Katoki's original design. And it is more successful and led to Bandai more confident in releasing bigger boxes for mass-produced mobile suits. However, that does not stop the original GM from going. There's a reason why Bandai struggled and delayed it new GM release for so many years. It is because people are satisfied with the GM because it delivers what people think of GM most of the time. Sure, some of the more dynamic, dramatic, and manual actions are not available, but most of the time, GM are just there to be stormed. And of course, when you have a GM that does better than that, you got all the other cooler variations. Again, Bandai did try to, well, I wouldn't say did try. Bandai made some very successful new version of the basic GM. So successful, in fact, some of them become very hot items. But that's not the purpose of this video. This video is to guide you through the process why I think the base model GM in HGUC is superior, if not as good, as later releases with its iconicness, as well as how Okuwara went below the base bar and make the GM more simple so that it is actually easier for Bandai to make a model kit that would look good for decades. Like with all the extra parts that Bandai have to throw in for, it is a very nice machine. It is a very nice, sci-fi stand gun. Again, I like the antenna. I like all these extra scope works on the code district type. But without all those flares, Bandai can make a very accurate, very easy to build, and just functions well GM. And I think that's, how Federation won the 1 year war. It's logistics. It's always logistics. I hope you like this one. I definitely get into habits of jumping around in topics again. That's kind of why I do SAGA now for my single mobile suit videos. But this topic, Bandai hunting for the Evergreen design for their mobile suits. This time the GM, yeah, it's sort of a wild goose chase. After they try to make the GM cooler, they find out that's not it. People like the GM because it is basic, it is simple. GM is realistic in its simplicity. Extra flair does make it feel more real at first, But as you look at them later, you work on them, you interact with them more, you will appreciate the simplicity and how that simplicity itself is realistic. Thanks for watching. See you next time.